Coming up, Election Day will be here before you know it. We dive into an Arizona-based nonprofit looking to make the voting process easier for Native voters. Plus, we learn about how the National Science Foundation is mainstreaming Indigenous knowledge. And we have the reaction of an Osage man up for an Oscar award. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Amidawahopa. Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Montana, where a drug cartel is believed to be adding to the fentanyl crisis by targeting 6 tribal nations. According to reporting by NBC, the Blackfeet, Flathead, Rocky Boy, Crow, Fort Peck, and Northern Cheyenne reservations have been impacted from the Sinaloa drug cartel. According to officials, the cartel reaches tribes by selling to community members using remote and local homes in the community as distribution centers. Over 700,000 fentanyl pills were recently seized from Montana's reservations, resulting in one of the biggest drug busts in history. In Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation is giving seeds to tribal citizens interested in growing traditional crops. To receive the limited supply of heirloom seeds, tribal citizens can apply online on a first-come, first-served basis. Seeds for 2024 include multiple types of corn, gourds, beans, pumpkin, tobacco, and more. Heirloom are traditional seed varieties that are at least 50 years old. Last year, the tribe gave out more than 9,500 packages of traditional seeds. According to Cherokee Nation Deputy Chief Brian Warner, distributing to citizens from the seed bank offers a vital link to Cherokee homeland and heritage. The 96th Academy Award Oscar nominee luncheon brought out Hollywood's top A-listers and newcomers last week, some of which were those from the Osage Nation who played big roles in the making of Killers of the Flower Moon. The film has 9 Oscar nominations, including for Lily Gladstone, who is the first Native American person to be nominated in the Best Actress category, and Scott George for Best Original Song. ICT's Paris Wise asked him what it meant and the Osage Nation to be nominated on one of the world's biggest stages.
Well, it's an honor to be recognized, to have our music recognized, and then in some cases introduced to people for the first time. Everybody's really excited, really proud of us, and then I think our tribal government almost shut down on when they announced it, because everybody was going. We said we're about to just go home for the day. Nobody could even talk or do anything to talk about it. But it's been really supportive. All of our people are really, proud that we have some representation now. Somebody said in our tribal newspaper, we've already won. Yeah.
Colleges and universities around the country are creating a space for Indigenous students to take a mental health break while taking time to connect with their culture. That's the case at the University of Montana, where Wellness Wednesday is designed to allow students to decompress in the middle of the week. Coordinator Faith Price said the event gives students a chance to connect and build relationships away from home.
I guess I've had people voice that they're very appreciative of these opportunities and that it makes them feel good, they look forward to them, and I know our attendance has gone up. School is a stressful time for people to be away from home and without their support system, so it's nice to be able to help contribute to that on campus. And then knowing that students need still access to culture while they're here and access to community and feeling like they have support and belonging, and how important that is for mental health.
The students at regularly take part in activities like the gathering of native foods to encourage food sovereignty and beading sessions to redirect students away from the stress of their studies. Indigenous students at have provided feedback saying they appreciate a dedicated space for them on a predominantly white campus. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Primary elections are coming up in many states, so have you registered to vote yet? The process can be a tad confusing if you've never voted before or if you think your vote doesn't matter. But the good part is there are organizations working to change that. ICT's Paris Wise spoke with Janie Parrish from Arizona Native Vote on the power of showing up on Election Day.
This year is an election year, so things may get complicated, if they aren't already. 2024 also marks the 100-year anniversary of the Indian Citizenship Act, which helped in granting Natives the right to vote, although they continued to face many hurdles. Today, accessibility, deadlines, and distrust still create obstacles among Native communities when it comes to voting. But the nonprofit Arizona Native Vote specializes in uplifting Native voting power and putting community first.
Many of our matriarchs, they take about 30% of their time to do community work. So they may not even talk about voting in elections at this point. It's just who needs help with water delivery, who needs help with maybe locating a group that does firewood delivery. This last week, we had some women in Hopi that were assisting a community member who needed help with the wedding. So they were getting wood and water ready and grinding corn. And, we have many of them that help with ceremonial preparation and just upkeep, cleaning, doing the dishes and things like that. So our folks, when they're doing real things like that, it shows them in the community, building those real relationships. And we don't want it to be a transactional, so that we're not showing up 2-3 months before an election and saying, vote, but we're there throughout the year and they see our folks doing the work.
Services offered are growing into voter education, voter registration, and getting people familiar with the overall election process. While spreading information and following campaigns is important, engaging in person is what can make all the difference.
The last midterms, it was only a matter of 280 so votes that helped elect an attorney general. When we show them things like that, the numbers, the visual, and I said, what's 280 people in Navajo Nation? And they're like, wow, okay, you're right. Or, what do you care about? Do you want more funding for SNAP? Do we need more funding for schools? Who makes those decisions? And when you take the time, I think, to connect their issue, their challenge to how local leaders and elected officials and how voting, all of that works to get to that funding or a law or a policy, then they're able to maybe listen more willingly and say, your voice is so important.
Arizona Native Vote fills in the gaps for elders or those who cannot access these resources with services like translating information from Native languages. And that's because every vote matters.
It's just only recently, I think, more and more folks are paying attention in terms of candidates, in terms of campaigns, in terms of issues, and of course, media, which is great. The more that can be invested, though, is really what we are always asking. So for folks to really look at hiring, training in our communities, because that helps us get over the many barriers that are in place in our communities. So for Navajo, and I know this is true for a lot of rural communities around the country, tribal rural communities, is we're so far spread out and it's hard to coordinate transportation, information, news in a timely and efficient and regularly consistent way. And so having a team that can do that regularly helps keep folks more informed.
Arizona Native Vote works in Navajo, Hopi, White Mountain Apache, and San Carlos Apache sovereign lands, including border towns and nearby rural communities. But this work knows no boundaries.
Native voters are powerful in Arizona, but that's also said throughout the country. We are friends in New Mexico, Washington, the Dakotas, Wisconsin. They've shown it time and time again, especially Alaska and Montana, where they are all working through similar barriers and challenges in reaching our communities, but they are also coming up with very successful strategies to educate, to outreach, get them registered, and get their communities to turn out to vote. And that's similarly what we're doing as well. So I think that understanding, even though we are, people may see us as a small population, we pack a lot of punch and are really powerful, because elections can be won by one vote, by 200 votes. And Native voters can have a really big say in those elections and who their candidate can be, especially if we have Native candidates on the ballot. That's really where we're seeing, I think, a lot more tribal community members speak up, stand up, is when we have Native candidates in office and they have a constituency that wants to see them in office.
Paris Wise, ICT News.
When I think about the reservation and my life there as a kid, it's a time and a place that I really yearn for, because I spent that time with really formative people in my life teaching me what it meant to be Navajo.
As Native Americans, substantial rights under the Constitution and laws of this country were going unenforced.
Those traumas show up in our elders throughout our lives, throughout our parents' lives.
A lot of the history is still impacting us to this day.
There's something really powerful that happens when you articulate an injustice. And at NARF, we do that on all fronts.
The Native American Rights Fund is the oldest and largest nonprofit law firm.
Fighting alongside our tribal communities to defend Native American rights.
I see the difference that it makes with our Indian people.
We are facing really challenging times. The right to vote has been under siege.
Without voting, every other right in Indian country that matters falls.
So it's really important to have NARF standing with our tribal people to define voting as part of the fight for tribal sovereignty.
Anytime Native American voters are in a position to swing elections, that's when you see the most egregious violations of their voting rights.
And so we responded to that moment. The Native American Voting Rights Practice Group arose with this rising anti-democratic movement that has been happening across America.
The voting rights litigation that we do is tough. The facts are tough. They're very personal to our voting team, but our wins are big. And we win all the time.
We have to be vigilant in terms of protecting our rights, just like we have these last 53 years.
In order to make good on the promise of America, we have to make sure that every Native American can vote and have the ability to effectuate change in their communities. I think that's the way that we collectively move forward.
The Native vote matters. because it's important, because it makes change in all of the states we work in.
When our ballot box achieves justice for Native people, that's when we as a country can really feel faith in our institutions.
This election year, NARF will be leading the fight to protect Native American voting rights in states across the country. Follow along as we tell our stories from reservations, communities, and on the front lines of democracy. Now is the moment. Join us.
We head now to the East Coast to check in on the Center for Braiding Indigenous Knowledges and Science. It is funded by the National Science Foundation and is based on 2 campuses, one in Massachusetts and one in Arizona. Stuart Huntington has more.
Bonnie Newsom, Nil Tliwis, Nagapan Wabscow Nil. My name is Bonnie Newsom, and I'm a citizen of the Penobscot Nation.
Professor Newsom is one of the Native scientists helping to lead the centers known as CBICs. I asked her about her work applying Indigenous knowledges to present-day problems.
From other research that I've done, particularly on large oyster shell middens or shell heaps on the Damariscotta River in Maine, we see that people harvested oysters sustainably for over 1,000 years. And when you compare that to what's happening with our oyster populations today, there are some real lessons that we can learn from people who have values that aren't extractive to the point to where we eliminate the resource. The goal is to bring Indigenous knowledge and science together so that overharvesting doesn't occur. And that, for me, is one of the benefits of CBICs, is beginning to look at ways that we can bring the past and the present together to shape our future.
Which is something the National Science Foundation is clearly interested in.
One of the reasons that NSF views the center as transformative is the proposal of doing science in a completely different way that is really sort of growing out of place and community versus trickling down to place and community. And so that's an element of it that I think NSF was really excited about, because it would translate to how science is conducted throughout all of the science that they're funding.
I think the notion of local and place-based knowledge is key here. And I like to use the example of the birch bark canoe, which is traditional to Penobscot people, is something that emerged locally because of the need to navigate Maine waters. And it's a brilliant piece of technology. And now Old Town Canoe, which is a very large canoe company, when they took that model and developed, what we see today as the Old Town Canoe, they took that intellectual property, and I'm not trying to slam Old Town Canoe or anything, but they took that design and marketed it, and now it's all over the world. And so if you think about that, and you think about that in terms of other pockets of knowledge that have generated at the local level, they can have kind of the same impact as what the birch bark canoe has had, hopefully in a more ethical way.
And what, I asked, about Native youth?
My hope is that we as Indigenous scholars can begin to mentor or encourage, younger generations to come into the sciences, be it archaeology or climate science or whatever. And through CBICs, they can begin to nurture those interests and grow with us. I mean, that would be my hope. I think this is really going to be transformational in terms of pathways to science for Indigenous youth and people. I am working for future generations, and I think that is one of the keys philosophies that science needs to embrace a little more.
Language revitalization is a priority for many tribes across Turtle Island. It's what ties them to their sense of place and identity. Almost 10 million people identify as American Indian or Alaska Native, but only 250,000 speak their Indigenous language. ICT wants to do its part in perpetuating the beauty of these Native languages. That's why we've added a regular feature to the newscast. Today, let's learn Ute from the Ute Mountain Ute tribe.
Mike Nuwak Nugan Nooch. Hello everyone, I am Ute. Mike Nuwak Nugan Nooch. Mike is hello. Nuwak is everyone. Nuga is I am. And Nooch is Ute. Mike Nuwak Nuga Nooch.
It was a tie this year for the Best Picture Book recognized by the American Indian Library Association. Laurel Goodluck for Forever Cousins and A Letter for Bob written by Kim Rogers were selected. Both books were illustrated by Jonathan Nelson. ICT's Shirley Snavy has this interview with him about his work.
I mean, it's a lot of work that goes into it, and it sometimes takes up to a year to 2 years. From sketching to revisions and then going into the painting and coloring and, getting revisions for those. The exciting part is the sketching. And when you're given the manuscript, there's the point from the ideas from the publisher and my ideas. And I think when we come together with our ideas, the magic really happens when we have a consensus about what direction it should go. And most often I kind of agree with the publisher and the book designer when putting this together. Most often the author will see the end product that I create, but really doesn't have kind of has our trust when we're building the project together. First Laugh, Welcome Baby, that was the book that kicked everything off. First Laugh was a little easier to work on just because the story itself was based on the Navajo tradition, and me being Navajo, there was a lot of parallels in the book that I related to. There's a city urban aspect, and then there's a reservation life. And so it was easy for me to put myself in the book because, I've lived those experiences.
Are you making a living at being an illustrator?
At the moment, I am working as an illustrator, as a graphic artist, but also as a government contractor with the BIA. Under one of the offices, it's a Division of Energy and Mineral Development. And there I get to work with tribes and develop their brand and identity, and also develop their marketing material. Having that identity and brand behind your tribe that represents your tribe, it gives them this presence that you really don't see in Indian country, is to be able to look professional and go after those contracts and continue to develop their economies.
What would you say people would know your work for?
People know my work through, the sheep that I've painted. So I painted sheep, and I've also drew sheep, as in the wool of Jonesy. And the wool of Jonesy really is this kind of a long timeline that I see in my head. The sheep went through a phase of evolution, and that's EWE. There you go. Yep, that's it. Evolution. And so Jonesy is part of that, where he is one of the future generations of sheep. If you look at some of the work that I've created, one is called Farm Wars, and that's a mashup of Jonesy and sheep and Star Wars. And that's a pretty fun series. I think a lot of people will recognize the work.
Well, Jonathan Nelson, thank you very much for joining us. And once again, congratulations on the book awards.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.